Hey, I'm Daniel, and you found my podcast, The Filmcraziest Show. Today I was joined by my guest co-host, Arpit Nayak, to talk with the filmmaking team behind the new Canadian film, Be Still, a film about an early surrealist painter named Hannah Maynard. Hannah seems to have been forgotten from history, so that's what makes the film so interesting, as we learn about Maynard, who lived in Victoria, BC, in the 1860s. For the film, we were able to speak with the film's director, Elizabeth Lazebnik, the film's star, Piercey Dalton, who beautifully portrays Hannah Maynard, as well as one of the film's producers, Sara Blake. To plug where you can find the film, Be Still is playing online in Canada at the Vancouver International Film Festival through October 11th, and information on that will be right down below, with hopefully more screenings on its festival circuit to be announced soon. So let's get right into this conversation.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Lazebnik, and I'm the writer, director, and producer on Be Still, and you're watching the Filmcraziest Show.
Hi, I'm Sara Blake, and I am the producer on Be Still, and you are watching the Filmcraziest Show.
And hi, I'm Piercey Dalton, and I'm an actor in Be Still, playing Hannah Maynard, and you are watching the Filmcraziest Show.
Cool, awesome. And I am Daniel, the host of the Filmcraziest Show, and I'm also joined by my friend and colleague, Arpit Nayak, who is here to interview with me as well. Happy to have everybody here.
It's great to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
Yeah.
So I'd love to start with some background, and I know both Arpit and I had this question, but it's taken 17 years to get this to the screen. So it's a loaded question to start, but Elizabeth, could you talk about like some highlights on that journey to get this to screen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I came to Canada, I guess, over 20 years ago now, and I went to film school basically right away. And I love art. I wanted to find out more about Canadian art. So I actually was, being a bit of a nerd, I would sit in a library and literally look through the books about Canada and Canadian art to find out more about my new home. And one of the books that I found was a book about Hannah Maynard. And right away I was fascinated. She's a photographer who was living in 1860s in Victoria, BC. And I saw these collages made back in 1870s, 80s, 90s of children's faces. And one of the collages had like over 20,000 faces in them. And then there were these images where almost like selfies. I guess even 17 years ago, we didn't have selfies, I don't think. So, but they were like this really interesting self-portraits. There were not just two of her, there were like 5 of her, and all using wet plate photography. So it was really quite complicated to make. And she would insert images, portraits of her daughter in there. So there was some sort of meaning there. And yeah, I just knew that I actually wanted to make a short film about her. So that was my first film right out of film school, which was a long time ago, back in 2005. And I just also knew that I wanted to shine more light onto this wonderful artist, who is also, according to my research, the first surrealist photographer. And but there was not much interest in women's stories back then. So I would work a couple of years on the project. Life would go on. I would put it aside, pitch it again in a couple of years, up until, I guess now it's been 4 years that there has been more interest in women's stories, women artists. And yeah, and we were able to get some funding by attending the Women in Directors Chair workshop and then applying for Telefilm Talents to Watch funding. So once kind of the focus and the interest about women lives emerged, it was definitely a bit easier to receive some funding and make the film. So yeah.
Cool. Now, there's a play by the same name by Janet Munsell. So I'm just curious, is that a direct adaptation or more like a guideline for this film?
I think it started as a direct adaptation, but I think at this point it's more like an inspiration. We're still crediting her as adapted by, but I think it's more inspired by. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now, also, Pierce Now, so what's it like for you playing a real person like Hannah Maynard, and what research goes into that? Like, is there different preparation for the character?
Different than like a character that's not a real person
Yeah.
that lived. I guess so. I guess so, in that there are facts that you can look up, but I think probably the research was the same as any character. You kind of find, you build, for myself anyway, on any character, I would build a person that I was simulating. So in this case, it was just already kind of built for me. But even to that point, I would say, like, I don't know Hannah Maynard so well that I replicated her. So I think I think I had leeway, would you say, Elizabeth and Sara, to be inspired by her. And I think the whole set was inspired by her. So once you got to set, everyone was so dedicated to their little portion of the project that I felt like we really built this world of our own, and it felt so much like a bubble. We also worked a lot, so we were really in it for the weeks that we were shooting. And I think whatever came out of that was a product of like the actual environment, as well as any research that we had done before. But for sure, I didn't have like a ton of time. I think I had a couple weeks before we were shooting, so I just dove into as much research as and obviously Elizabeth and Sara had so much available, so I just dove into as much research as I could. And yeah, definitely there's a terrifying aspect of trying to honor someone, because the more that I read about Hannah, the more impressed and like shocked and like more questions, just constantly more questions came up, probably even as we were shooting, of just like, who's this woman and how did she do this? And where is she, like, in all of our material? And why haven't I heard of her until now? I mean, I think you can say that about a lot of historical figures, but yeah, I don't know. I tried to use the force and tried to just read as much as I could and embody it. And I truly used a lot of help from everyone. Had done such extensive research. The art department was phenomenal, and like the DP, everybody truly was coming in with a full intention to honor Hannah and the work that she did. And so a lot of the times I leaned on them in moments on the set of any choices that we had to make or decisions, that was really helpful.
All right, cool. And it's pretty interesting to me because it is a real person, but this is like a fictionalized account, right?
Somewhat. I mean, yes. So yeah, there was a photographer, Hannah Maynard. She did live in Victoria. She did have that studio. The studio is basically recreated quite, it was a great detail. She did have a daughter, Lily, and she had a relationship with her. The husband was Richard. So there's, she did created those photographs, which we tried to recreate in the in a very, great detail. So there's a lot of, I think the main parts are true, but I definitely, the approach, probably the audio-visual aspect is a bit unconventional.
No, I was just gonna say some of the story, because it's based off of the play a little bit, and was obviously drawn out to be a film with a full arc. So that part, there's obviously manipulation, I guess, to make the story work for the film.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to call this more like a love letter to Hannah Maynard more than a biography?
Sure. I didn't think about it that way, but yes, I guess it would be more of a painting of her rather than like a realistic photograph. Yes, or it's my interpretation of who she was. I would say that a loving interpretation. So yes, love letter works. I didn't think about it this way, but yes, absolutely, it works.
Okay, yeah, I thought of it as like a love letter to her and art as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. I'll let Arpit jump in with a couple of your questions, my friend.
Sure. So usually I love to, begin my question with this question that, so in case of Elizabeth and Sara, it will be like, what inspired you to become a filmmaker? And can you guys describe about your journey so far? And in case of Piercey, what inspired you to become an actress? And if she can just describe about, you can just describe about your journey so far. Whoever like to go first, they can go.
Elizabeth, you should go first. Oh, okay.
I think Piercey, do you want to go first? You're the star of the show.
I can.
Okay,
I
let's do
can
it.
go first.
Yeah.
What inspired me to be an actor? I think I've narrowed it down in like the decades of reflection. It's definitely been something I've wanted to do my whole life, as far as I remember, and something I participated in any chance I had growing up. But a memory sticks out in my mind of watching Mary Poppins and Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins specifically, and seeing this woman, like, I don't know if you guys have all seen the movie, but where they laugh themselves to the ceiling, I just thought it was so fantastical. And I also believed in all the emotions. And I remember as like a very young child that resonating of like, oh my goodness, they're stretching, like they're making me believe them so much that now they're stretching our imagination to believe that these things could happen where I could laugh myself. I really felt like laughing with them and flying to the ceiling, you know, might be possible. And I wanted to be able to convey that, like I wanted to bring that to other people. And then the journey was winding and is still winding. And it started, I was in a small town, so it wasn't an obvious like path. And I just did high school theater, or before high school, primary school theater and high school theater, and tried to get into our town's local theater. And then I went to university for a Bachelor of Arts and did theater there. Just, it was always kind of something on the side until I actually went to England for a year and found physical theater, which blew my mind. And so I came back to Vancouver. That's what brought me to Vancouver. And I trained at a physical theater center there. And then I was thinking about auditioning for the Cirque du Soleil and doing silks and all that stuff. And I happened to meet my trainer, Kate Twa, in Vancouver at a gathering. And she brought me into her studio. And that's where I got to start like really training for what I think is like pretty committed, serious theater training, I guess, black box training. And that led me to finally getting management and work eventually when I moved down to LA, is where I've been able to really delve into it. But I keep coming back to Vancouver.
Yeah, love your story. Love your story. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go next. I think I always wanted to do something creative, and I actually grew out in a town where the art scene just almost was non-existent. And when I tried to think what is it that I wanted to do, directing never even came to my mind up until probably my late teens, because that's not something that women were doing. So that's like being behind the camera was just, or theater director, that just never even was an option. Like I didn't even think about that. So yes, I think at some point somebody said, how about you try and go dancing? And I just very quickly, I figured out I don't like being in front of the camera or on stage. That was just so not me. So that I tried to do some drawing. I can't draw. And then anyway, and eventually, I know, it's so sad. It's like, and then actually in my teenage year, my grandmother told me that she had a friend who unfortunately passed away, like already back then, but she told me that she was a film director. And I was like, oh, film director, what is that? And then I started finding out more about that and watching her films. And yeah, and that's how I just felt so much more comfortable being behind the camera and, you know, coming up with stories and kind of being in my own world. That just felt so much more natural. And when I came to Canada, so that's like, I already knew that I wanted to go to a film school. And I did my undergrad and my master's at York University in Toronto. And yeah, I've been making films. Yeah, I've been in Toronto for more than 20 years. So I've been making films here. And but as I said before, it's been hard to get a feature off the ground. So I'm very excited to finally be able to do that. And hopefully I'll make a couple more features. That'd be nice.
I'm pretty sure teenage you must be very happy right now, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like it's funny and sad at the same time. So
What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I when I was younger, I didn't actually watch a lot of movies, but I made a lot of movies, usually with some random DV cam that my parents had, and tried to like edit in camera. One day, finally, someone explained to me that there was programs for that. And like, so I think over time, like as I obviously got a little older, then in high school, there was like some opportunities. There was like a film and TV class, and I also was like always involved in theater, and like a lot of storytelling kind of based classes were always my favorite. So finally I just like was like, well, I might as well try for film school, see what that's all about. Cause I had no like I was kind of, I wasn't really like a film buff per se, but I just loved making them and loved telling stories, and I could really get behind like well, any story that I thought was really interesting. And then so when I got to film school, I went to Simon Fraser University. It was pretty much like you get kind of thrown into just making stuff all the time, and it turned out to be really fun. And from that, I realized that, oh, I really like helping other people see their vision. I enjoy also like making my own stuff as well, but like there was something about kind of being a part of as many projects as I could have that I really enjoyed, and I found like gave me a lot of energy. And then so shortly after, I went into I worked for a sales and distribution company here in Vancouver, and I really learned like the market side of filmmaking and like the business side of it, which was really interesting and kind of opened up a whole other world that I didn't really know anything about. And kind of after a few years there, it was a small company, so there was a lot of opportunities for me to kind of work on their projects that they were doing, and also go to a lot of the film festivals and markets and get really familiar with like the landscape. I started making short films and just a lot of like arts council applying, and working with a lot of my still close collaborators, like a lot of people I met in school or through people. And yeah, and then I kind of finally dove into the feature world, and here we are.
Amazing. So, Elizabeth, I'd love to know that, how long did it took you to, do your research? And while we know that it took 17 years to make the film, while the whole journey of yours of making this film was going on, was there any part that you were keep on adding to the story?
I would say the research has been in a way ongoing, because so I did a lot of research when I was doing the short. That was probably the most research I've ever did. So I had all these documents, and then throughout the years, like sometimes I would put the idea to the side, how to say? I would, because the funding was not available, and then I would come back to it, and it always is. She almost becomes like a family member. So you come back and it's like a person you haven't seen in a couple of years. And then because I would again get lost in her artwork, so I would go and read all the materials, and then I would go into additional research. And then when we were making the feature, the production design team, for example, they did a lot of research on their own, because and that was quite meticulous as well, because like I'm not a production designer. So in terms of like, the backdrops, how to make that, how to like the actual camera, for example. So every time I would find out more and more about her as we went. So it was, in a way, it was very organic. Yeah.
So Piercy, I'd love to ask you this question that, as a actor, how do you get into someone's psyche? I'd love to know that, because the person really existed, but, in a way you have to go to her set of mind frame to play that character. So what's your process like to get into the mind frame of any character?
I think that the basic answer to that for me is that I just find a way to relate to them. So I identify things in any character's life that I've also experienced on any level, and then I try to tune it to the level that they experienced it. And I've trained and I do practice like making things pretty personal for me on set. So I either have like, stories of my own that I think I can identify, like that I can relate to Hannah's stories, or you imagine certain circumstances too, and then you put yourself in that. But that's all, like, for me, that has all been because of extensive solid training that those skills have just been built up over time, I think, to be able to relate to somebody and to like kind of grasp the meaning of these events in all our lives, because they're so different for everyone, of course, like one thing can mean something so different to someone else. So but yeah, and reading about their story, I mean, I have to admit, like, Hannah was a profound, like that whole film was a pretty profound experience, because there was so much impressive about this woman, and I always empathize quite deeply with people who've lost children, and that was really effective. And then, like I said, just that everyone around us was so invested that you kind of, I don't know, Sarah and Elizabeth, did you guys I felt like there were ghosts on set. Like I felt like we were that might be too much for everyone here, but I felt like there was some kind of spirit, not like maybe technically, but like on set, that you're able to just live in that world. And so then there's an energy that I feed off of that way too.
Yeah.
So grief is something that plays an important part in her story. So this question is for you both, Elizabeth and Piercy, that like as a storyteller and as an actress, while you are just trying to moving away from the character. Let's say the film is finished now, you no longer will be into the process of the film, and same for you, that you won't be in a character of that film. So how tough it is for you to just go away from the character, or let's say the story?
For me, it's pretty difficult actually, because I do see her at this point someone like a family member. So it's not, I'm not going to just kind of not think about it or put it, just forget about it. And like I'm also involved with the promoting the film, the submitting, then we'll be submitting the documents to kind of wrap the film up. So hopefully releasing the film. But after it's done, I think it'll just be, as time goes by, and even during those 17 years, like I made 15 shorts. So it's kind of just there. It's like, it doesn't I don't think it would fully go away, just because she's pretty big part of my psyche. And that goes also to other projects that I have been making or are going to development, are in development, because that's for me that thing, that's kind of part. It kind of gets under my skin, and I almost like need to make it for it kind of to ease off a little bit. I guess I have a little bit of an obsessive personality, so it helps it was helpful to make a film about her. So kind of to release that obsessiveness. I don't know. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely do. What about you, Piercy? How do you find yourself in that situation?
So sorry, let me just clarify. It's how attached I get to a character and how I can depart from it when we're done shooting?
Yes. Let's say once you're done playing that character. So, one of the actors interview I have took that, he was saying that when you play a character, when you finish playing him, the character takes away something from you. it gives you something as well, and it also takes away something from you. So how you find that detachment once you're done with the character?
I don't know. I don't know if I can fully relate to that feeling of being like, I don't know if I feel like something is taken from me also. I definitely feel like I've gained a lot every time I play a character, especially such an impactful one, like a real one too, I think made more of an impact because I felt like I was learning a history of my own history that I didn't know or something. I mean, I know, I don't know if this answers the question, but I know I'm incredibly exhausted at the end of a shoot like that, and feel like I'm in a different world. Like I almost feel like I'm in a parallel universe for a few weeks maybe until I come back to reality. But other than that, I mean, I don't have any practices to release a character. I don't feel like I've ever gotten into any trouble taking on a character. I feel like I can always like come home and be myself, but I still carry, you know, I don't want to like, I kind of want to stay involved in the world until we're done the shoot. But I guess it's just time after that. I know I went to the studio where I trained, the theater where I trained right after we shot Be Still. And so then I was already picking up another character, you know, so that might have helped too. I don't know. But yeah, I think they just teach me every time I get to perform somebody. I just learn so much. So I definitely retain that knowledge and often will like, you know, think of them when I'm doing other characters, like any similarities and stuff. But yeah, I don't know actually the answer to that. But that's my reflection on it.
No problem. Daniel, you'd like to ask your questions?
Yeah, sure. This one's for Sara and Piercey, because we know that this is a passion project for Elizabeth, but I'd love to learn how you guys kind of got on this project, what attracted you to it.
Yeah. So Elizabeth was at the Women in Directors Chair program, which is usually held, like, I guess, in Whistler and Vancouver area. Okay. And a mutual friend who also happened to be the production designer on the project, Sophie Jarvis, she's also a director, and was in the program as well. And I guess through the exercises and classes, the program itself basically she saw Elizabeth's script, met Elizabeth, etc., and kind of contacted me. I was like, you need to meet this person and you need to read this script. It's very cool. The idea sounds right up your alley. So essentially she connected us, and Elizabeth and I, because it was only for a couple days, so then Elizabeth and I talked via Skype for I don't know, it seemed like over a couple of months maybe at like most. And I mean, Elizabeth sent me the script, she sent me the original play. She kind of sent me all of the stuff that up until like that she found on Hannah Maynard, and like introduced me to the book that she had like found at the library, and basically like opened my eyes to a person that I had no idea about before. And I was equally as taken with all of her photography and the choices she made, and then like Hannah's choices that she made as an artist. And then I saw Elizabeth's work, and I could see a lot of the similarities, or at least the like I could understand Elizabeth's passion behind it. And so I got on board. I just felt like it had to be made. Elizabeth convinced me. It's a great idea, and it like really highlights a really amazing artist who, yeah, I had no idea about. So I felt like, why not try and get it going? So that's really, I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. A lot of Skype, a lot of research, and a lot of Elizabeth giving me all of the information so that I knew what I was getting into.
I feel like we're dating it by referencing Skype.
Right? But actually, I don't know if Zoom was even, I mean, it probably existed, but
Yeah.
I don't think it did. I mean, nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't
March
either.
2020 was the big like Zoom. Yeah.
Zoom exists now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Piercey?
Well, Sarah and Elizabeth reached out to me because they had seen some work of mine, I think, in
Yes.
Yes.
and asked me to read. Yeah, you asked me to read for this character, and I did, and I mean, I think my answer is just that I love acting, and these people came, they came to me with a fantastic character, an opportunity to learn more about a real person that I wished I had known more about. I immediately started looking into like wet plate photography while I was still in Los Angeles before I flew up to Vancouver, and it was all so spectacular. I mean, it was a spectacular story, like, and Elizabeth and Sarah were so invested, you know, and I definitely appreciated being reached out to based on previous work that had been seen, or like, so, you know, it felt really personal, and that feels rewarding and worth the effort. You know, you're like, hey, this is going to be, I think for me, that's when I feel like everything's going to be really respected and honored and intentional. And that sounds like a good setup, you know? So yeah, I was thrilled. I mean, it's a juicy character.
It
Yeah,
is.
I feel like it was all amazing.
Okay, awesome. And I'd also love to ask a question. I think this is a producer hat question, but it could be for director too. But I just want to ask about the set, because I thought it was kind of interesting how we spend most of pretty much the entire film inside with Hannah, but then there's this one shot where we actually see the kind of historical village that you guys seem to have shot in. So was that a different set for the exterior? Was that the same house? Can you just talk about that and finding that set where you guys shot for this?
Yeah. It's definitely two different locations.
Okay.
The Elizabeth, you can talk to it more on a creative level if you'd like.
Sure. Yes. So the script was, there were definitely some scenes that in post-productions I made a decision to cut. So there were a couple of scenes in that village. There were a couple, or outside, and in post-production, I felt it was this, you know, the most appropriate route to go would be to have the film more from Hannah's perspective, and the shots that were filmed outside did not involve her, a part of the scene where we see it.
Okay.
And I felt like it almost gave too much explanation, so I decided to cut it. So yes, so just for what we see right now there, like we probably would not have rented this entire location, but but it was a really cool experience. We were outside, it was a sunny day, we were filming in March, so but it was lovely. And I think Sarah was dressed up as well, right? You were
Oh yeah, we had
some background actors, and I think everyone had a lot of fun just like being there. But I think maybe that was actually one day when Piercey, you were not there, or you were there just for a little bit. Like,
are we talking about by the water in the park?
Yeah, no, we're talking about where you're like pouring out the tea outside, but then the farm. Yeah, but then there's like a couple of other scenes where she just wasn't. I think that was your only day off, actually. So
yeah, good. I had one day off. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
and barely. I mean, I feel like you were there in the morning, and
in the morning, yeah,
that one shot, and
Half a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, was that in BC or in Ontario?
Everything was in BC. Everything.
Okay. Okay, cool. Now, I'd also love, Sarah, I'd just love to ask if you had any, just a really producer question. Did you have any like big problems that you had to solve on set during the filming?
Big problems? No, actually. Like no huge problems. I think with this film specifically, because it was, it's talent to watch, it's kind of, it's on the micro budget scale, there was just a lot of prep time. Like I made sure that we took our time getting everything ready for production, which I think really helped. I don't know if that luxury will always be allowed. Although of all things, this is just a silly thing, we had a lot of car troubles for some reason on the set. That was the regular, like we had people accidentally lock their keys in the car. We've had people like break the key like in the ignition. And then there was at one point where we couldn't get the truck out of the driveway because it got stuck. Like there was a couple of like funny, weird logistical things.
Maybe because cars didn't exist
problem.
in 1885.
Yeah, because cars didn't exist. Exactly.
Kind of cursed.
That's exactly
Yes,
it.
the ghosts.
That's where
the
the ghosts were giving us their input.
Yeah.
No, I can't really, think of anything that major. Most
Okay.
of it is, yes. Do you remember something that I don't?
Can I throw in that one? I didn't know about any of those problems. So that's like a testament to how, like, when Sara says that there weren't any major problems, it could also be because the team like took everything in stride. I thought like that set was so creative. I don't know. Because of these pandemic times, I haven't had an opportunity to watch this film because we don't have the proper setting. So I don't know what made it in there, but like there was a bathtub scene. Is that in there?
That's
so,
in
like,
there.
There was
Right.
so much work that went into that stuff that I think would blow people's mind to see how the crew and Elizabeth and Sara handled and managed it all. Like it was we were constantly, I felt like constantly coming up against things that were not expected. But then, we adapted. They adapted so gracefully, I would say, like that it all just rolled into the production. Anyway, I just felt the need to clarify.
That's very good actually, because it's so true. I think that's maybe why also, like, I agree. I think that's why there weren't any what seemed like major problems, because everyone on the team was like working 150%. Like they were putting everything into it. And when I say like prep was early, like we had the house early, we had art department in there like weeks before we were shooting, making it look the way it did. We had all of our teams coming in to do all of our scouts and walk through rehearsals and like walk through the setups with our AD, and like, because we knew we had a short amount of time to shoot. We didn't have a huge budget. We tried to be very conscious about, people's time and the length of days, because everyone was driving far. So it was just a big, it was just really an amazing team. Thanks for bringing that up, Piercey. Actually, that's a really great way to frame it. I was just like, what major problems? My brain is like, did I just erase them all from my my memory?
No problems under me.
There were fun things. Like, I just want to say, in that bathtub scene, like, we didn't even know if that dress I was wearing was handmade. Like, there was so much detail in this production. We didn't know if the ink was gonna what do you call it? Like,
bleed.
I think it actually did the first take. I think we had to. Yeah, it did.
But then you were like, I kind of like it because or some people were like, actually, the rusty pipes in 1800s, like, maybe this works, and like it was just constantly being like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like that's how mistakes were taken, or not mistakes, but trouble was like, oh, is that something we could use? Let's see.
Absolutely.
Way more enjoyable.
I forgot about it, but yes, absolutely. Yes.
And we built that bathroom, like that bathtub. We had to bring in water.
Like people
and
were
fill it up
and out while lying there. Like,
oh my gosh, I forgot all of this.
Yeah, there was a lot happening behind those serene moments.
That's
amazing.
Awesome. couple of
I
movies.
just remember the crew trying to
sorry.
get this bathtub outside. Actually.
Oh,
Oh, yeah?
Gosh.
So heavy.
It was extremely heavy. It was like, oh my gosh. Okay, anyways,
No.
yes, that was great.
Oh, good. Arpit, did you want to jump in with a couple of yours?
Sure. So I'd like to know from both Elizabeth and Sara, what are their thoughts then when they're being called as female storytellers?
Sorry, what are the what?
When someone describe you as a female storyteller, what do you feel when someone just describe you as female storyteller?
I don't know if I heard it to my face that I'm a female storyteller. So yeah, I haven't had this direct experience, but I think it's kind of, it's not great. Like I'm a storyteller. Yeah, I would rather not to be categorized, but that's my answer. Yeah. I'm proud of it. Like I'm a female and I'm proud of it, but yes.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't mind. Like I'm happy that more women are being recognized. If it takes having to categorize someone as like female filmmakers, great. Sure. I would rather be making movies and keep like moving forward. I think it's something it's worth. I think I'm proud to be working and making work. So yeah. Ooh, I haven't answered that quite. That's an interesting question.
It
I'm
is
about it. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I've ever thought like so specifically about it before.
Yeah, no issue. You can always rethink, right?
Yes, always.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, I'd love to know this one thing that, the films talks about the human relationship, also talk about inspirational people. At the same time, it talks about the grief, art. So how were you able to achieve all this as a writer while you were crafting the story?
Well, the base was already there because it's adapted from a play. My aim was actually to make it more visual, to make it into film. So the recreations, for example, they're not in the play. So the play is much more talkative. So, and all these themes of grief and art, they are there. So that's been very helpful. But yeah, I wanted to kind of come up with the ideas of how to do the reenactments of her more surrealist work and make it work around the themes of grief. But in the editing room, we kept cutting out the dialogue and trying to let the images and the sound design became a much bigger part than I initially thought it would. I thought it would be like the hum would be there, but I think we kind of took it to the next level and made a very interesting texture experience. So yeah, that was more of a, not challenge, that was more of a journey, because all these, that was a nice part to have a play to adapt, that it's, the work kind of has been already there.
So grief is one of the things that, play out a huge part in her life, which we can see in the film as well. So do you believe that, is it fair to say that when person is going through certain grief, it can brings out the best of art from that person? Is that fair to say?
I think it's probably individual. I don't want to generalize that, but I do believe that art can definitely be a resource to deal with grief. And I think, especially talking about women, for the female experience, I feel that when women are grieving, oftentimes the kind of the me time is being, put to the side, and you need to take care of people around you and not process your own grieving process. So in this film, I definitely wanted to kind of to make sure that the character does take that time and unapologetically, and does use her art to help her through the grieving stages. So that was important for me to show that. But to say that the best art is created when the person has a really significant loss, I don't have an answer for that. I think it's individual to every person. I definitely don't want to be going through anything. I don't wish upon anyone to be going through anything like this. I think there's such a array of experiences that we all have throughout lives to learn from and to be inspired from, that I don't think that, death is the how do you say it, the standard for great art. I think that's, yeah.
So, I as a writer always wonder this thing that, that how do you, as an actor, play, or let's say as a director, portray, when you have to portray certain emotion, let's say you have to portray that person is going through the grief, so as an actor, and I think it's a question for both Elizabeth and Piercey, that as an actor, how she portray the emotion such as grief, and as a director, how do you able to achieve that, to show that person is going through a grief, or let's say any of the emotion.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I think one thing that was important and is important to remember that especially professionally trained actors, and Piercey touched on that, and you can speak more on that. You have your own, how do you call it, kitchen, your own, things that you've learned, you know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and that's what makes it great. So we are talking about the emotions. We will be talking about emotions that Hannah went through, about her backstory. But because Piercey is such a great actor, my main thing that I remember, I was just saying maybe like a bit more intense, a bit less intensity. So it was just doing that. But she, there was a reason I chose her. Like, we loved the tape, and so I knew that all these emotions were there. She was definitely capable to deliver. And I think I was trying to stay away from your process and just kind of, again, just saying, like, just fine tuning a little bit. Because I know some directors, I think they're like trying and actually giving advice of how to process this or that. And that's definitely not, I think, yeah, that's not the road for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. That's how it felt. And that's definitely an environment I work probably better in, or I'm more comfortable in anyway. And so then the more comfortable I am, the easier access I have to my emotions that way. I was given, I think, a lot of precious space on set when those moments were needed. And I definitely was always in conversation with Elizabeth about what level of emotion we were using. But again, the set was just so creative that I think, we kind of both dished out what we had going. Like, I would maybe do something and Elizabeth would give her thoughts more, like, rather than directing my physicality or emotion, she would give her thoughts on where Hannah was coming from or something. And that's really helpful for me, because the more I understand the story of this character and what they're going through, then the more I can relate and find that. But in terms of what I find incredibly helpful and really appreciated was that there was a seriousness around it. No one on set would talk, I think they gave me physical space during some of the more intense moments, cleared the set a bit and stuff, and that really helps me so that I can just be fully believing in myself and believing that the moment is real.
That's great. Daniel, you like to ask your questions?
Yeah, sure. Now it's 1:53, so are we okay just to ask a couple more?
Yeah.
Because I'm such a nerd for the technical aspects, so I would beat myself up if I didn't ask about any of those. So I got to be picky now. One sec. So there are so many surreal aspects to the film. So I just love to ask. Can you talk about any of the?
Daniel, you should retake, I guess.
Did I freeze?
You did.
Good.
Glorious freeze. Yeah.
Yes, that's we are on Zoom. That's great. So there's so many kind of surreal aspects to the film. So I'd love to ask if you can talk about any of unique camera techniques or unique editing techniques that you used for this.
Well, in one of the scenes, it takes place in Lily's bedroom, there are 5 Hannahs there, and the shot is kind of moving across the room, and we see 5 Hannahs doing different activities. That was probably one of the hardest shots to do, because the way you would generally do like a double, like the same person in the frame, like the camera would be static. That would be the easiest way to do, and that's how it's generally has been done up until a couple of years ago. Because if the camera moves, then the backgrounds are different and the cameras don't match, because basically you would get the camera in a static position, and you would kind of map the set where the actor wouldn't cross to the other side. And so the first take, the actor will do whatever they're doing, just with the idea that they don't cross to the other side, and then the stop, and then the actor would move to the other side of the frame and do the actions on that other side. And because the frame is exactly the same, you can in post, cut the scene, those scenes in 2, literally, like in the middle, splice them together, and it will look like people are doing, they're in the same space. Does that make sense?
Somewhat? I think so. Sounds like a nightmare for blocking, though.
Yeah, it is. If you put enough, if you put enough planning into it, then it works. But yes, it's absolutely, it requires pre-planning, like extensive pre-planning. So in this particular scene, not only that we had 5 Hannahs, but the camera was also moving, and we had to actually get a specific camera that was able to be programmed to do exactly the same move 5 times. So that was what was the name of it? I forget. We had a specific. Sarah, do you remember?
It's just a motion control.
Is it a motion control? No, I remember there was some sort of name. Yes, but it's a motion control, and yeah, that took, I think, most of the day, because we had to make sure that that each of the Hannahs, they really knew what they were doing. They were there was some interaction between them, and then we also really had to make sure that to get that camera movements. And sometimes, actually, because we were filming in the older house, the floors would shake if people would walk down there. So so that means that the camera also would shake a little bit, so we would have to retake. So these were like probably the most it's mostly time consuming, but because yes, everyone was so into the project, and it was kind of fun to do and fun to figure it out. Like, I think we had a great time, but definitely a lot of choreographing. Absolutely.
Okay, neat. And I also love to ask just about like the black and white, because you kind of go from black and white at one point to color to black and white to that has some yellows that seems in between black and white and color. So what was it like navigating that? And is it kind of more difficult for the color grading?
Yeah, the initial thought, actually, the initial film was all in color, but I wanted to make the part where she's really recreating the images to be more kind of psychological, like to really show that it's in her mind. Okay. That's why I made it more monochromatic. But I also wanted to differentiate Hannah's spaces, so she was feeling more creative in her studio. So that kind of had the sepia yellow, like golden tint. But when, for example, she's in her dark room, it was still monochromatic, but it had a very red tint, right? Okay. And at some points with her husband, because the relationship kind of had some tension, I kind of had either black and white or bluish. I know, Piercey, you'll see all of this. So
sounds great.
Yeah, but at some point there's a change, and like all of the creativity goes away, and I wanted to show it through the visual medium. The film turns into full color. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of show these different spaces that the character goes through, and that's. But it was definitely a journey to get the film color corrected. Like, it took us a while to find a person who would understand the film and would be willing to experiment, because all these looks also like had to look consistent, because there were quite a few looks, so it doesn't look completely random. Okay. And it took a while to do this, but again, I found the process really interesting.
Okay, awesome. Now I'd just love to sneak in. I want to ask, have you guys seen The 20th Century? because
I actually haven't, but I
Okay.
definitely heard about it. But I think Sarah did, right?
It's great. Yeah, it's great. The film is lovely.
watching this film, I kind of got like just like a lot. I found there was a lot of like similar, maybe like visual techniques, as well as just it's kind of interesting because they're both stories about Canadians and they're both kind of fictional. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you wanted to speak about that, Sarah, because you've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I have actually thought about that film a lot, I think, during the process. We had already shot Be Still by the time I saw 20th Century, because that came out like 2019. Because we shot in 2018.
Okay.
No, early 2019? Early 20. I have to look at my
Yeah,
calendar.
2019.
It was a while
Early
ago, but
2019. Okay, early 2019. Yeah, and then I think 20th Century. I think I saw it TIFF.
yeah, later
2019.
this year. I remember,
Yeah. So I remember being like, oh, like quite surprised to see something kind of equally as interesting, and like there's just like especially all the set builds, and just a very specific directorial choice, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, I mean, 20th Century is also very funny. I couldn't stop laughing, which I don't know if Be Still is particularly funny. But yes, a lot of like the strong directorial choice, I think, between like both. Yeah, like I remember watching it being like, oh, this is a really cool like inspiration. Honestly, if we had seen it probably before, I wouldn't be surprised if we would have used it as a reference, just especially for the builds and like the way that the characters are developed.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to
Anyways,
see this. I
yeah, it's a
haven't
great.
seen
Yeah,
it.
you should see it. It's an amazing film. Yeah,
Very strange. Probably one of the weirder
Very
movies I've
strange.
seen, but I recommend it.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. So before we go, I'd love it if you could just plug where people can find the film, because I'm pretty sure it's premiering at VIFF very soon.
Yeah, Be Still's premiering at the Vancouver International Film Festival. It officially starts on the 1st of October, and I think goes till the 11th. And there, you can access it online in all of Canada that way. And then we also have 2 in-person screenings because yay, things are open, sort of.
Very exciting.
So October 6th at 6:30 and October 8th at 4:30. Yeah, I think VIFF,
Okay.
the website has all the basic information and where you can buy tickets and stuff.
Okay, great. So I'll stop the podcast, but I wanted to thank you all for coming on the Filmcraziest Show to chat about Be Still, and hopefully something in this podcast makes people want to go out and check it out. Go out and check it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. This was great.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. That was fun.
Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank
I
you
was-
both.